So hello everyone, my name is Charles Banfield, founder of Karate Canucks, and I'm back with another in our series of conversations with prominent Canadian martial artists to capture their stories, advice, and opinions on various related topics. Today I'm very pleased to be joined by Sensei Peter Giffen. And aside from being a lifelong practitioner of karate as a student, as an instructor, and as a competitor, Sensei Giffen is also an accomplished writer and editor, and is currently the chief instructor of the Ryusei Karate Club in Barrie, Ontario. So welcome, Sensei Giffen, and thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Excellent. So so why don't we just start with some general background information about you so that our viewers can have a little more context as to, where you're from, where you grew up, that kind of thing.
Certainly, yeah. So I was born and raised in Toronto, and I started karate in 1969. A friend of mine played pool at a local hall in Leaside and told me there's a karate club beside it, so we checked it out. So Higashi Sensei Shane Higashi, head of the Canadian Shiru, was my main instructor throughout my life. Through him, I was able to meet Dr. Chitose, the head of Chiru, based in Kumamoto, Japan. I went over in 1977, 1979, and 3 or 4 other times to train with him and his son. And then later, I joined Sensei Ken Sakamoto, who was Dr. Chitose's son-in-law, who launched Ryusei Chiru Karate and represent it now in Canada. And the only other part of my martial arts overview, I also did Kobudo with Higashi Sensei, and I either have 3rd or 4th dan, I forget which, but I've done that for quite a while as well. So that in a nutshell is my martial arts career.
So are you still actively training in Kobudo, or?
I've come back to it now. Unfortunately, the pandemic has changed a lot of things, but I had started to teach basic Bo to my students and some other dojos in our network. I had reconnected with Higashi Sensei and said that we would sort of join with his organization in being graded and so on. But unfortunately, that came to a hard stop with the pandemic, but we will do it again. And besides the Kobudo I learned from Higashi Sensei, Sensei Sakamoto does his own variety of Kobudo, which we will also incorporate into what we do.
Interesting. So it's interesting you mentioned Dr. Chitose. O Sensei Chitose is also known. It's his birthday today, or it would have been his, I think, 122nd.
Yeah. So yes, it is remarkable. Yes, it is his birthday, and my birthday is in the same month, so I'm in good company.
Yes, and Higashi Sensei, who you mentioned as well, his birthday was earlier this month too, actually on the 14th of October. So he turned 80 this year.
Apparently everybody who's worthwhile was born in October.
My wife is as well, so yeah.
There we go. That confirms it.
So back to Chitose Sensei. You mentioned you traveled to Japan and you lived and trained with him and the current Soke for a while, back in the 70s and a few other times. What brought that about? Was it that you were invited to go, or did you apply to go, and did you go on your own, or were there others that went?
Well, what had happened is, I forget the year, I think it was 1975. I saw O Sensei, I think, a couple times before that when he came to Canada. So after 75, I had an interest in seeing him. In 1977, I was on the Canadian team to go to the IAKF, which is, I guess, the Shotokan-based World Championships, and Sensei Higashi was going as well. So that we just arranged that after the tournament, we'd go down and I would stay with O Sensei for a couple of weeks. So that was the genesis. at the tournament, I was kicked quite hard by American in the hip and could barely walk. I was hospitalized. So it was interesting. We went down to Kumamoto. I was hobbling around. O Sensei sort of examined me, talked to Higashi Sensei, and said he'll be okay in 3 days. In 3 days, I was out and training. So he had a good eye for karate-based injuries. But I guess at the time when I went to see O Sensei, we were under Soroka Sensei. He was the head of Chidoro. And at that time, because of, I guess, the prominence of JKA and Sensei Soroka's natural predilection to respecting the kind of biomechanic approach to learning karate that they did, a lot of the Chidoro karate was very Shotokan based. You know, we did Shotokan kata, like the Pinans or Heians, and we did long stances and so on, very big techniques. So I remember, you know, the first time I worked out with O Sensei, I adopted a long Zenkusa dachi, and he talked to his son. He said, "We don't do that stance," you know, and then showed me the right way. And then when we used to say us a lot, you know, and so he said something, and I said us, and then he talked to his son, and he said, "Only Yakuza use that expression. Don't say that." So the first two things I did apparently were wrong, but it was a great introduction. It sort of showed me that karate was not just a sport, but an art, and the kind of level that they were doing it at, and the kind of extra depth as far as bunkai fascinated me. So that in 2 years later, I came back with a friend, and we stayed for 4 or 5 months. So that was my introduction to him.
So how would you describe then the training, or how would you characterize the training with O Sensei versus what it was like with Sensei Higashi?
Well, I mean, both types of training are very good. Sensei Higashi's training in those days, because he was not long out of his own competitive career, and he had a number of highly ranked competitors like Dominic Pinto, John Carneo. And so the training at his dojo was quite grueling. I mean, we'd often sweat right through our gis and our belts and sort of drag ourselves home. With O Sensei, I mean, he wasn't training people to be competitors per se, so that it was quite, people would just come before class and they would warm up on their own, so that they weren't sent to a grueling sense of exercises to get ready for class. You're expected to show up on your own, and then you would stretch. You might use the makawara for a while. With Dr. Chitose, he would lead the beginners through a set number of basics, and then kata, and then application of kata. And he would be very quick, even as a man in his 80s, to get young people up to attack him. And if you didn't attack him hard enough or not realistic enough, he'd make a disgusted expression, slap your hand, then you would have to come in with some authority. And you would usually find yourself on your back at that point. He was getting older, and sometimes he'd like to talk, and he would do these, what I guess were brilliant lectures. Of course, I didn't have enough Japanese to follow, but there was one time where his son, Yasuhiro Chitose, went off to teach a class somewhere else, and he left his father teaching the junior class at the dojo. So he left, and halfway through the kata, I think it was Shiohai, he stopped, and he talked to us about the kata and everything else until his son came back. And then when he heard his son drive up the driveway, he counted to the next number. We finally got to finish the kata, but his son came in, looked at us suspiciously, and never knew that we were in the thrall of an hour-and-a-half lecture.
So then, would it be fair to say that when you were training in Japan, in Kumamoto, it was more technically oriented as opposed to
okay, so yeah, the differences. Okay, so it's more technically oriented. I think that in those days in Canada, it was very much punch and kick. You know, it was very JKA. It was percussive. In Japan, it was true Okinawan karate. It was well-rounded. So we would be doing things for the first time ever for me, like Henshu Ho, and a lot of his techniques would end with a throw, right? And then he would do joint locks, and there would be chokes. So that I was introduced to karate as a well-rounded method of self-defense. So more technically oriented. I don't know if it was a wider definition of what karate was. It was not just, in the 60s, 70s, karate was very much oriented just towards tournaments. Fighting was synonymous to fighting in a club and fighting in dojos. I mean, fighting in dojo, fighting at tournaments. And it wasn't until later where people said, well, okay, no, these are contests under rules, and there's a lot more things that can happen in a fight that aren't covered by these rules. So we need to expand our definition of what karate is. Well, that definition was already expanded. And so that the self-defense aspect and the fact that, karate for a number of the people like O Sensei, like Inamoto Sensei, Sakamoto Sensei, and young Chitose Sensei, it was not something you did as a hobby, but it was a lifetime pursuit. And in fact, your work was often used to support karate, not the other way around. So, I thought overall that the technical level in Japan was lower than Canada up to black belt. It was, relatively easy to get a black belt in Japan because the same weight wasn't given to it. In the early days, a black belt was considered, like you're an expert, right? Since then, that thing is involved in black belt is often looked on as a first step in a true beginning, right? But in Japan, it was not really considered that big a deal. But where it left people behind, or left us behind, is when you got people who were dedicated to pursuing karate as a lifetime passion. And you got people like Inamoto Sensei and so on, who really achieved very high technical levels and also integrated the spiritual and philosophical aspects into life. So very inspiring.
Okay, so you also mentioned Sakamoto Sensei.
Yes.
So you mentioned that he, was a former son-in-law of O Sensei Chitose, and was obviously a part of the Chitoryu organization and family, if you will.
Yeah.
But has since moved on. So moved on to form his own organization with his own, I guess, take on Chitoryu karate. Just curious to learn a bit about your introduction to him and how things kind of came about where you are now with his organization.
Okay, so I mean, when I did my first trip to Japan in 1977, after I went down with Higashi Sensei to train with O Sensei, I then later traveled on my own. I wound up in Tokyo. At that time, Sakamoto Sensei had, I think, just come back from Kentucky. He was in the self-defense forces, then spent a couple of years in Kentucky. He was married briefly to Deborah Dimitri, William Dimitri's daughter. Unfortunately, that didn't work out, so he came back to Japan, was in Tokyo area with his, I don't know if both his parents were alive then, but his parents, I think. When I went up there, Yasuhiro Chitose suggested that we get together. We worked out. When I came back in 1979, he had met Dr. Chitose's daughter, Reiko. And actually, as just kind of a side note, at one time there was some dojos that were looking for a full-time Chiru instructor, and I had recommended that they go to Sakamoto Sensei and ask him to come over and do it. And I think Higashi Sensei was sounding this possibility out, and O Sensei got on the line and said, don't ask him. He's been going out with my daughter. They might get married. So anyway, I went there. They were married. Sensei Sakamoto and Sensei Chitose were friends at that point, of the same age, and very, very, they pushed each other quite a bit to increase their skill levels. Unfortunately, over time, the competition became a little bit more heartfelt, or anyway, so that eventually there was a kind of a division, or a real competition between them, so that after Dr. Chitose died in 1984, they tried to keep it together, but the Sensei Sakamoto decided to leave. He felt he was teaching true karate of O Sensei. Young Chitose thought he was teaching true karate of his father. It was just two people with two strong points of view. The breakup was attended by a lot of hard emotion, but I think that it was natural to happen. You have two people who have strong ideas about how to do things. They should both be allowed to do it their way. So it was kind of a natural division. So, I don't want to get into politics too much, but, there was in Canada, there was a lot of political division between East and Western Canada. And then also after the father died with Japan, Sensei Higashi, Sensei Okinawan, a number of us were sort of involved with a very difficult political situation. At one time, when it looked like young Chitose would support Okinawan over Higashi Sensei, I sort of got up at a meeting and I told him what a jerk I thought he was, which I had sort of been in contact with people like William Dimitri, Sakamoto, and Inamoto. Well, I shouldn't say Sakamoto and Dimitri, and there was a strong chance that they would split off and join Sensei Higashi in starting a new organization. Sensei Higashi decided that because of his loyalty to O Sensei that he couldn't do that. And so after that, with the kind of ill will achieved by doing these sort of arrangements, I eventually decided that I couldn't stick around and be a negative influence as other people went forward and tried to do creative organization. Sakamoto was on his own, and besides the political reason of not wanting to stick around and being kind of a sourpuss about politics, I liked what he was doing with his karate, his interpretations of kata and bunkai, which were very personal, his digging in other martial arts to give him insight into his karate practice, and his approach sort of resonated with me. So I joined him as sort of his only member in Canada, and we grew into a small but strong organization since then.
I've not had the pleasure of meeting Sakamoto Sensei, at least not to date, but I have seen a number of videos, demonstrations that he's done, and so on, and there's a uniqueness definitely to his approach to, I recognize the forms, because a lot of them are forms that he helped refine and so on during his time in Chitoryu. But his approach to it is very, very soft and very circular, and it's almost on a Tai Chi level would be an accurate description of it.
He looked at sort of Chinese sources for things, but I think sort of he trained very hard in the standard Chiru curriculum, but he was also mindful of the fact that every time O Sensei gave a demonstration, he would demonstrate very high level kata, family kata, kung fu no kata, which had a number of different parts. Mm-hmm. So O Sensei was not teaching these as a general part of the curriculum, but he was quite open in demonstrating him. So in Sakamoto Sensei's mind, there should be a progression from the basic karate technique to this higher level technique that he saw O Sensei do. And O Sensei, when he became a member of the family, by marrying his daughter, started to show him some of this technique. other the technique he got through videos he was provided of O Sensei, so that he sort of pieced it together. So to him, this higher level technique, which had this kind of, which we believe had kind of a Chinese influence, is where the Chido technique should lead to. So he started exploring ways of having, strong body connection, so that you, with the right body connection, you can have a soft body but strong technique. He started studying the internals, and using open hands. He introduced at the intermediate level the left-handed side version of Niseishi, which is open-handed, to get people start preparing for the more internal and softer version of the kata. And he started teaching them or challenging his higher level instructors to start learning them, after Shihan level, so on. So that's sort of some of the differences. And he's studied other martial arts. He studied sumo when he was in the military forces, and so that the sumo stance is something that he incorporates into Sanshiru. And then he takes the Chinese idea that each kata has sort of a governing spirit or theme. So open part beyond the basic katas like Seisan Niseishi, when you get to Basai, sort of the movements of a snake or spirit of the snake. When you get to kata like Sochin, it's sort of a bull. And so that each kata would have unique flavor. So if you have a kata that has the same move, like the chase punches in Rohai and Shinto both, but because the theme of the kata, the feeling of the kata is different, the same technique is done differently in the two different katas. So that it's not just a matter of taking the same basics and recombining them to make kata, that each kata should have a unique flavor. So that was his approach.
Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah. Yeah, it's common for particularly with Rohai Sho and Niseishi Dai. When you do the Kosuke,
yeah,
a lot of people they start doing one and then doing the other one, because that point is basically the same technique and is done the same way. But yeah, that approach of treating it differently would be insightful for a lot of people, including myself, I'm sure.
Yeah, and he also said something, his approach to bunkai has been quite interesting. Like the katas are stylized, the bunkai is stylized. Every defense is against a Chudan or Izuki, which is unlikely you'll ever be attacked in that method. So that he's, tried very hard to find the natural principle at the core of these things to make them more realistic. He'll do defenses from different types of attacks, not just the standard one. But he also says something which I think is worth paying attention to. If you've done a bunkai, you've tried very hard to get it right for a number of years. Like number one from Henshu Ho, a lot of people have difficulty with. If you've done it for 5, 10, 15, 20 years and it doesn't work, well, then you better change it. You can't just expect that, it's a sign of insanity to do the same thing over and over and expect a different result, right? So it's nice to have that permission to sort of play with things at a higher level to try to get them to work for you, your body, your understanding, and not always have that very sort of narrowly defined approach.
So you mentioned earlier, sort of just getting back to your personal history, martial arts a little. You mentioned earlier that you first began karate in 1969.
True. Yeah.
Sensei Higashi, and you've obviously moved through the ranks. I believe is it a 7th Dan now currently?
Yeah, I just graded for my 7th Dan. Yes.
7th Dan, and you've also recently achieved the title of Kyoshi, I believe, if I'm
with Sensei Sakamoto's group. When you get a Dan, you're automatically awarded the title. You don't do separate exams.
okay. Okay.
It saves on trouble and money.
Okay. So, okay, thanks for the clarification. So I'm curious where I'm going with this is I'm curious as to, back in 1969, what was it that drew you to martial arts and karate in particular? Back then, was it that you knew people that were doing it, or you were just curious about it, or I'm interested.
I'm just trying to know, in the 60s, as a kid, I had a curiosity about judo. So, it could have been stupid stuff like, watching the Avengers on TV with Diana Reagan and Patrick McGee doing sort of that kind of stuff. So there was some TV reasons for it. And there were comics like Judo Master, which I'd read, so that as a kid you have Superman fantasy. So in my around 10, I guess, I forget the age, I found a local judo club. I went to about orange belt, and then I had a friend, the one who went and saw karate beside the pool hall, the snooker hall. And I was just, I was sort of more attracted to the striking aspects, so that I went and did that. Then also the doing karate became hugely popular as Bruce Lee, first in the Green Hornet and then later in the Big Boss. I mean, dojos filled up instantly overnight after the Big Boss was released, so that there was a I think I started just before that, but that certainly reinforced my interest in it.
So you said you were drawn to the striking aspect of it.
Yeah.
And I know that you were a kumite competitor, actually quite successful one, for a number of years. I'm curious, so over time, has your focus sort of changed or diverted from the kumite side of things more to the kata and form side of things, or are you still seeing more of a balance?
Well, yes, I got involved with the kumite. I mean, our club was very much oriented towards that. I was working out hard. But I have to say that as I was doing kumite, I was sort of looking for the time when I could stop and sort of focus on a wider range of technique. This happened mostly after I saw Dr. Chitose. So, I mean, I was very successful as a young competitor. I think I won the senior tournament which was the national tournament before their nationals, when I was 18, still in high school, and then had another few. I was on the provincial and national team a few times. So I would say that I still believe that kumite is very valuable. It teaches timing, it teaches courage, it teaches you have to have strength, timing, strategy. But it's, I think, one of the tools to understand karate. If you make it your only focus, then it becomes kind of not superficial, it's not the right word, but it's a sport. Whereas I think karate is a much better rounded approach than that. So if I have a student who is interested in tournaments, I of course would help them to it. I have lots of people who aren't, and I don't like to neglect them because they're not oriented towards tournaments. So so that's kind of a long way of saying, yes, I believe there's value in sparring, there's value in tournaments, but I would like to see them, for a serious martial artist, to make them part of your focus and not your full focus.
So more well-rounded approach as opposed to just one or the other. Yeah.
Yes, I do. I mean, I think that, we were going to talk about the Olympics at one point, and, for me, I have sort of mixed feelings about that because it does bring karate into more prominence, but my worry is that the Olympic focus will turn it into more of a sport and sort of differences between styles. The analogy is in some ways, you can think that judo has been changed by its Olympic focus. Since the '60s, is the Olympics, and judo I don't think seems to be as widely practiced as karate is, because I think that people sort of view judo as, well, this is for elite athletes, who are trying to go into competitions and so on. And they lost a lot of the self-defense aspect that was contained, for example, in their two-man kata. And I know that judo has tried to sort of widen its appeal by emphasizing things like the kata. So I think there's dangers in the Olympic focus. I mean, if karate gets in the Olympics, I certainly would like to watch our athletes compete and enjoy it. But is it good for karate's long-term development? I'm not sure about.
Yeah, actually, you read my mind. That was going to be my next question for you. As a former competitor, kumite competitor, what were your thoughts on Olympic karate or whatever? But
well, I mean, I think that, and I'm prejudiced on behalf of karate, that they can make a strong as or stronger appeal than taekwondo. But again, this is my preference. So I mean, I think they could do a good job of it, but I'm just sort of, as I said, I'm worried about the loss of some of the nuance and self-defense depths of karate. Because I mean, I know that every elite karate practitioner can defend themselves because they're fast and strong and so on. But then an elite basketball player, football player could also defend themselves, and they have no particular knowledge. So I'm not down. Well, like as soon as you say I'm not doing this, that sounds like exactly what you are doing. But as I said, we have these elite athletes doing karate, aiming towards these competitions. And my hope is that when they get past their competitive stage, that they don't just become coaches and hang up their trophies or quit because their career is over. I hope that they continue it with their dojo and dig deeper.
Okay, so tradition is a ingrained component of most martial arts, particularly the Eastern martial arts.
Mm-hmm.
Just curious about your thoughts on the importance of tradition in training of karate, and what I mean by tradition is the various rituals that take place, the adoption of the terminology and the phrases in the native language, whether it's Japanese or Korean or other. I'm just curious as to what your thoughts are on this. And the reason why I'm asking is because I've had conversations with people, and some have argued that it's a form of cultural appropriation. If you are say you're training in North America, for instance, and everybody is, using the Japanese terminology and the bowing rituals and things of that nature when you're not in Japan. I'm just curious as to what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I have a few thoughts on that.
In both places.
First, as far as cultural appropriation, I don't think that suits. If I start, if I start doing something that, speaking with using sort of language from perhaps the Black community, or adopting some kind of ceremony from Native people, I think there's a danger of appropriation because you're dealing with a disadvantaged group that don't have much say in how they're being used and exploited. I think Japan is a very strong culture, and they're happy to see that their culture is honored through these practices around the world. In fact, I think they would, well, I mean, I am culturally appropriate now saying what they would think, but my impression is that they much rather see karate done with our understanding of their culture and language than just Americanizing or Canadianizing it. So I don't think appropriation is the worry. I mean I run my dojo in a traditional manner, or as traditional as I can, with bowing, with the use of Japanese, and I think that part of understanding karate is understanding its cultural context, and I think part of that is doing that so that, you know, in my own life, I've read a fair bit about Japan and its martial arts. I've tried to learn Japanese a number of times. It's like Sisyphus. I get to grade 1 level, then I stop, and then I start to roll the boulder again. But, you know, going on the assumption that it's the striving that counts. So that there is value in the context to understand how it developed. I think, you know, there's a danger that you could become mindlessly attached to cultural context. People, for example, can be very much belt oriented, because getting belts are affirmation of that you're good. You can stroke your ego, and people get very much rank oriented, and I think that can be a drawback. So sometimes when I do workouts, I'll tell people to come, or clinics, I'll tell people to come dressed in sweatpants and t-shirts, so that rank isn't the issue, and we just work out to see how techniques work. Because, you know, it could be a high rank could be a trap for instructor. You know, you're supposed to be better than somebody else. A technique doesn't work, you get frustrated, you get mad, you punish the student, it makes you look bad. So that rank can be a double-edged sword. So that's a long way of saying that there's good aspects to understand the culture, and there's sort of dangerous ones too. And also there's dangers of, you know, just because somebody is a Japanese karate instructor, thinking that they're better than anybody else because they come from the land of karate's origin. The truth is, you know, they're just people. They have good points, bad points, and so we're better off viewing each person as human, and not just, you know, that they're that much better because they come from the land of where karate was born.
So I guess related to that, or related to the cultural, or the traditional, I should say, not cultural, traditional aspect of karate in particular.
Mm-hmm.
What about the hierarchies that are, you know, often put into place in different dojos? You know, you have your sensei, your senpai, your kohai kind of relationship. You know, again, curious as to what your thoughts are on, you know, whether it's
well, okay,
not appropriate, but whether it's productive to have this in a non-Japanese environment.
Well, I mean, yeah. So I mean, it goes back to the issues I sometimes have about rank. I think it is appropriate. You have, in a perfect system, you have people who have been working longer, know more, and, you know, they shouldn't just work for themselves. They should help the people under them to get better. So that is the basis of the senpai kohai system. But, you know, the senpai kohai system has also been abused. You know, there's been instances where senior students and senior instructors abuse lower belts in various ways. There's you know, you have cases where people get rank that they don't deserve, and then suddenly they're in a position of prominence in a dojo, and you know, people are supposed to look up to them, but they can see that there's deficiencies in either their character and technique, and so it undermines the idea of the hierarchy. So I'm for the idea of people getting legitimately experienced and helping under those under him or her develop, you know, so you're not just focused on your own development, but you help the people under you. And the people under you, I mean, it's not great under you, but anyway, under you should respect your your senior knowledge and try to learn from it. But they should also be smart people. You know, they should make decisions for themselves and say, okay, this guy is the real deal, or this guy, well, he really doesn't know what he's talking about. I'll be respectful, but I have to be an adult and use my judgment and not just take everything at face value within the hierarchy.
So you encourage questioning.
I encourage questioning. I mean, I encourage questioning, absolutely, and a lot of thought has been gone into the development of our karate systems, but neither the systems nor the people who constructed them are perfect. So you respect them, but you also have your eyes wide open so that you can deviate if you need to.
So as somebody who's been, involved in the martial arts for over 50 years now, curious as to whether you have a favorite technique or a set of techniques, or a favorite concept or a set of concepts that you
a favorite technique. No, I don't have a specific favorite technique. I mean, obviously, over time, my body has changed and my focus changed. I mean, when I was 12 to 17, flying back kick was my favorite kick. So I like the theatricality of it. And but I would say that rather than technique, over time I've come to learn that there's principles in karate that if you understand, they can apply to almost all your technique, and they allow you to be a serious practitioner throughout your life. We talk about lowering our weight, but what does that mean? We talk about keeping the scapula down. What does that mean? We're talking about being soft but connected. These very basic principles in karate, and you can dig into further. There are other martial arts that go very deeply in how do you sink your weight, how do you stay soft but connected. I'm doing some Tai Chi work with this very sort of esoteric teacher who comes from Indonesia of Chinese extraction, and keeping your shoulders down is a basic concept. But how do you drop your scapula so that he has us? One of the practices is just to hold your hands up, fingertips at your eye level, and you're supposed to hold that for 1 hour, 2 hours without pain. Well, I mean, I could do 10 minutes of that and then I'm in agony. And the idea is not to sort of build muscle so you get stronger, but the way that you eventually do this is you loosen your lower body so that the muscles that are holding your body up change, so that the scapula sink down, and rather having your arms held up by your shoulders, you start to feel it held up by your lower back and your lower body, so that this starts to give you a different connection as you use your body, because you're not getting the raise of the shoulders as you're punching. So I'm just doing an example. So there's opportunities to dig deeper and deeper into the fundamental principles of karate. And if you could understand and master them, then you can become a formal karate practitioner throughout your life.
So would this fall into the category of things of, something that you wish, or a concept that you wish you had learned sooner in your karate career, or?
I wish it is. I mean, I sometimes say, yes, it'd been great if I'd been introduced to this earlier, I could do it. But on the other hand, I'm doing it now. And sometimes you have to be ready to see something that's going to change your practice, So, there's a number of practices that I'm into now. I do Zen meditation every day, and with the idea of training my mind, I try to do the Tai Chi practice. My karate practice is a little bit behind these days. I have a lot of us who started karate in the 60s have had serious issues from the way we're training, so that I'm due to get a hip replacement, which is major surgery. Until I do that, I kind of hobble along, do as much as I can, but I'm not sorry for myself. I'm lucky to live in a day and age where there's a chance that these things can be repaired so that you can continue on. So it's a long, long winding road from what techniques I want to do. But yes, the answer is it's not techniques I'm interested in, it's the principles. And if you understand the principles, then the techniques flow from that.
So looking back over the 50 plus years that you've been involved in karate and in the martial art, I'm not going to ask you if you have any regrets, but what I will ask is if you could do it over again, is there anything, looking back now with the advantage of hindsight, is there anything that you would have done differently in terms of your training or the approach to training? Or
well, I mean, I'm trying to teach my students differently because, you know, one of the things with the injuries we have to our body is that we trained a certain way when we were in our teens and 20s and even 30s, that when you try to extend into your 40s, 50s, and 60s, it sort of hurts the body. So I would say that being wiser in my practice in my middle years, I probably would have want to do. I would say that I love karate, but I think you should be in your physical training, you should be more well-rounded and cross-trained so that you develop your body in different ways and not just sort of the one way. I probably would have tried to start digging deeper into understanding these principles and the kata meeting earlier, but you know, I don't regret it. I mean, if I was given another kick at the can, and you know, maybe I'll turn Buddhist and have another life. Who knows? But if another kick at the can, yes, I would do differently. I would probably get into the areas that I am in now earlier. But this is something done from my point of view right now. I was, of course, a different person when I was younger.
So you mentioned cross training, the importance of that, or the benefit of it. I'm assuming. Sorry, I don't want to assume. Do you mean cross training with other types of activities, like physical conditioning type activities, like resistance training and that, or do you mean cross training different styles or different arts?
That's good. I mean, I did cross train different styles, different arts. I mean, I did try other martial arts and other dojos. So I would say both. So I would say the thing I would say about cross training with other styles of karate, other martial arts, is to do it with your principal focus, Chiru karate, your style of karate as the principal focus or the prism through which you understand things, rather than being a dilettante and doing a little bit of this, a little bit of that, because it eventually doesn't add up to what you want it to be. Because I have seen people who they'll pick up a kata from there, or they'll do this from there, and they try to put together their own patchwork. And unless you're kind of a martial arts genius, I don't think that works out. However, if I'm a Chiru practitioner and I go to Tai Chi or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or whatever the other martial art is, to try to give me insight into what I'm doing, I think that's very valuable. Because if you were to look at like somebody like O Sensei, he was very well trained. He trained in judo, he trained in Kobudo, he knew sword technique, he trained with a variety of the best instructors of his day. And that wasn't, again, you know, it wasn't a dilettante. He was developing his approach, taking these things and making himself stronger. So I do see that. And then also the physical training, the type of exercises we did, you know, they develop our bodies in certain ways. But, you know, for example, if you sort of stand up and let your hands drop down, most people in karate, their hands, their thumbs will slide in front of their thighs, right? Because they've developed the fronts so much that they're this way. Whereas if you're a healthier development, when your arms drop down, your thumbs will be pointing straight forward. So we are developed by the types of exercise to do certain muscles. I mean, and I think people would be better served if they had a more well-rounded range of exercise to develop bodies. I mean, in Tai Chi, I told you about the harm, because of all the years we spent doing push-ups and so on, there were little old ladies. I mean, I'm a big old man now, but who were holding their arms up quite easily after a bit of time. And I'm still struggling, but it's not because I'm getting wimpy, but it's just that it's taken a long time for my shoulders to drop because we spent so much time, developing our body with certain types of exercises. So I guess that's what I mean.
So with regard to cross training with Chito-ryu as the primary activity or the primary style that you're training to, are there any specific other activities that you would recommend to help improve? Like, and I'll see this with an example, like with the Goshin Jitsu, the throwing and the self-defense techniques and so on that are inherent within, well, not just Chito-ryu, but in a lot of other styles as well. A lot of them are grounded in judo, different types of jiu-jitsu, and other types of activities. Is there one or a handful in particular that you would recommend some study to enhance Chito-ryu?
Oh yeah, okay. So I would say that both judo and aikido would be good areas of study. Just because I'm somewhat familiar with the two of them, I don't know the jiu-jitsu as well, so I can't really comment on it. But I think both of them can give insights into our bunkai. I think O Sensei studied judo, and it pops up now and then, and the kind of joint locking techniques you can learn from Aikido Jiu-Jitsu. I think it's also worthwhile to take Kobudo. Kobudo used to be the other wheel in the cart with karate. It changed when karate went from Okinawa to mainland Japan. I mean, two things happened. One, the Okinawan weapon system was stripped away because Japan has such a strongly defined weapons culture. And then the throwing and joint locking aspects of karate were also lost because of the judo and jiu-jitsu that Japan had already had. So, to really understand karate, I think you have to add those things back in. So what the Kobudo teaches you is, first, it reminds you that this is a martial art, because if you do Kobudo with a partner and you're not careful, you can be hurt quite badly. So you have to, whereas, if you're doing karate, yes, you don't want to get hit, but you get hit in the face or body, it's painful, but usually you just walk away from it, right? Whereas somebody bashes you with an uncontrolled bow strike, you can be in real trouble. So it teaches you to be really concentrated, really aware, and thinking of it as a martial art. The other thing it teaches you is, in Kobudo, you always move out of the line of attack to block, right? So that the movement, every block is accompanied by a slide out of the way. And this is very important to remember for karate training. You shouldn't be taking blows straight on, but you should be evasive and deflecting things. And then, of course, you have different types of weapons. You have the sai and bow, and according to the type of weapon, your distance changes quite a bit. Mm-hmm. So the awareness of distance, the getting out of the line of attack, and then the very serious martial aspect of it is something that's very important. So that I think Kobudo is important to have, as well as some insight through other martial arts, and Aikido and Judo are certainly ones that I would recommend.
Just a couple more questions for you.
Sure.
This one we've touched on, or you've touched on it earlier when you were talking about progression through the martial arts and the difference between, in Japan versus outside of Japan. The question is around, what does a black belt mean to you? You talked before about it had been relatively easy to maybe earn a black belt in Japan because the philosophy on what it means is maybe different than what it is or what it has been on this side of the Pacific. That is more of a level of expertise as opposed to readiness for learning and so on. So I'm just curious as to what your thoughts on.
I think I align more with the Japanese philosophy in this, that you're made teachable by black belt. I understand that people, especially young people, getting a black belt means lots. So, I know within the first few minutes whether somebody's going to pass a test or not, but then I'll put them through a very grueling test just so that at the end of it, they can feel proud that they've got their belt, because it means a lot to them. But, I would say that people who get a black belt, there's a number of these, I've got my black belt now, I can go off and do something else now. They're missing out because I think it is, you've learned the basics and now you have a chance to go deeper. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of people who do go deeper, but yes, so a black belt means it's the first real step of the journey to me.
So is there then a minimum age or would you even categorize it as that? Because I know in Japan, I've seen examples of some very proficient karateka, by the way, but they're 8 years old, and they're wearing black belts and so on. Would you say that can you be too young to?
Yes, you can be too young. So yeah, I've seen some examples of very proficient 8-year-olds who do it, but even though they have sort of physical maturity in some of their technique, they're still young kids, and I don't think they have black belts. I think our rules in Japan is that there's a junior black belt allowed from 14 to 16, then get adult afterwards. But I don't know if I ever graded a kid at that age at 14, it'd either meet the adult standard or not. I wouldn't give them a junior black belt. So yeah, I think you have to be mature in your body, your technique, and in your outlook. I don't think you should give black belts to kids. To me, black belts to kids is mostly a marketing technique. It's like printing money. Yes, you might think you have a lot of money, but you keep on printing it, and then the currency is devalued. So I've seen dojos where a 10-year-old Nidan has quit because he didn't think he had anything else to learn, right? I had one young kid who brought up a friend from another dojo. He was a black belt 10-year-old. And so I did everything I could to make him feel welcome. I put him at the front of the class. And, all my kids were sort of, just, looking at him with great curiosity and think, oh, he must be so good. Nice kid. I said, I asked him, okay, would you show us one of your kata just so we can see you do it? Again, I'm not trying to put him on the spot. I just want him to feel like, he's being respected for what he's done. Unfortunately, he couldn't perform full kata. And then, the kids sparring together, which I do, and he was just part of the group. The thing was, he was no better or worse than anybody else. He was just about the same. Mm-hmm. So, he was at an okay level of development, but, by giving him a black belt, where's the kid going to go? He thinks he knows everything. And the thing is, like my kids, he knew nothing or very little. So you're not doing him any favor or her any favor by grading them up, giving you access to money that grateful parents will pay for the grading to think that how accomplished their kid is when really their kid hasn't accomplished anything.
Yeah, it tends to be more of a feel-good thing,
Well, it is. I mean,
and for the kids too.
Yeah, I've been told by professionals, instructors. I mean, the ways that people make money at martial arts, if you're a full-time dojo, you put people on contracts that roll over 1 year into the next, and because they know that most people are going to quit, so they want you to commit to a year ahead of time, like a health club. And then, they say, well, with kids, the parents really want to see them advancing. So one dojo told me, well, within 2 weeks of their joining, you should give them their first test, and stripes all the way and charge for each one. And parents are delighted to see the test. So let me just turn this off. The grading kids up young to me is a scam. Kids can become very, very, they can learn a lot young, but I think that if you grade them up too fast, you take away their future. You need to have them look towards something, and you need to know that though they could even be very accomplished physically, they have to have the emotional maturity, because karate is not just about physical ability, it's about emotional maturity and willingness to learn and share.
Okay, so what advice would you have for anyone who's looking to start karate, either themselves, either as an adult, or or if they're looking as an activity for children to do? What advice would you give for them for considering that activity, and also considering a school or a dojo to join?
Well, I mean, it's a tough one, because karate is not like being an engineer or an architect, where you have to be in a licensed profession. Basically, a martial art, you can claim anything you want, and it's hard for people to know the truth. I could claim I'm a 10th Dan, and there's a organization in the US that would certify me as a 10th Dan, so it wouldn't be true. It wouldn't be untrue. The question is, how much value would I be able to give? So because karate is not a regulated profession, except for very obvious lies, it's tough to know what's true, what's not. So, and there's no easy answer on how to get past that. So I would say, look to people who you respect, and if they take or know somebody who takes karate, to get their advice. I would go to the dojo and look at the class being conducted and seeing how the students are treated. I would talk to the instructor, and if they're reluctant to talk about money, run away, because that means there's going to be a lot of money involved. You'll go to some of these dojos, and they'll start talking to you about your kids' life goals, and then they'll sell you some package that somehow aligns with it. So talk to the instructor, find out what kind of hidden fees there are, and then go for it. So I don't know. There's not. It used to. I would say it used to. I don't know what it's called now. It used to be called the National Karate Association in Karate Ontario. It's now the Ontario Karate Federation, Karate Canada, right? I'm trying to get the proper names of these.
Yeah.
So I know that their criteria for getting people to join is less strict than it was before. But if they are with these organizations, they're government-approved organizations, presumably there's some standards involved. So I would say that it's probably a good idea to start with dojo that are aligned with these government-run organizations. And I mean, if you know something about karate, are they part of a legitimate karate style? Do they have a headquarters in Japan? If they're report to be a Japanese or Okinawan karate style. Yeah. Anyway, that's not very helpful, but that's the best I can do.
No, I'm sure that's helpful for people that are genuinely curious about that. The red flags, I think, though, that you brought up are important. Like the interesting about asking somebody what their kids' life goals are. Like, kids don't know.
No,
for the most part.
No, they don't. I mean, so that they'll sell them some claptrap about how it's going to get them to achieve it, and the discipline, how it's good for kids. I've had kids brought in who are complete disasters, and the parents want to have miracles. And you could give them discipline in class, but if it's not reinforced in home, you're not going to be able to do much. So you just have to be sort of realistic and honest about what you can do.
Last question I have for you is there anything that you would like to add that we haven't covered, or any information you want to share about where people can find you, your dojo, your organization, that kind of thing?
Well, I mean, our dojo for us is Ryusei, RYUSEI -karate.com, so they can go there and it links to whatever information they want. I'm trying to think. Well, I think that we were talking about the context of karate and understanding where it comes from to really appreciate it. I have to say that, I was lucky to train with Dr. Chitose. He was a remarkable man, but he was also very human, so that, for example, when he was getting older and his family would, when his family was to be more worried about his health, he loved to put sugar in his coffee. So, he put sugar in, and then he pulled the bowl away. And when they're not looking, he would start to dump more sugars in and then give me a wink and take a sip. And his family would scream with horror and he would laugh at the kind of chaos he made. So he was very, very, he was a very nice guy. He had a real sense of humor. He loved to tell jokes. He loved to go and play the samisen and sing with it. And at the same time, he was quite a remarkable karate guy. I mean, there's one story that's heard over and over again, but there was in the mornings, one of the most interesting times of training was in the morning, because we'd get up at, I forget it was 6 or 6:30, and Dr. Chitose would be there, his son Yasuhiro Sakamoto, Eric Peters, and I. So we'd have a chance to train together. We did some very interesting things. But there was one morning where Dr. Chitose turned to my friend Eric and it said something, and we thought we understood, but Eric didn't want to go forward, and so Dr. Chitose said it again, and then Sakamoto from the division turned to Eric and said, "Grab his balls." And so my friend went over and tried to do that, and as he did it, Dr. Chitose retracted his testicles inside his body, which is something he taught so that if he ever got kicked in the groin, he would be protected. And so that is kind of a funny story, but on the other hand, to train to your body to such a degree that you could do this sort of is kind of shows you how committed they are into learning their art. There are lots of very interesting things about him. I was told, for example, he used to have a kami where he had his fingers like this. Somebody would attack, and according to Sakamoto, he would be able to break the person's bones using the fingers as attack. And the Sakamoto sensei himself, I remember we'd all do kicking and punching of the makawara, which is and they had like makawara, like sturdier ones for kicking, and then sort of smaller, more flexible ones for punching. But I remember he'd be kicking with his toe tips full force into the makawara, and I said, "Well, why are you doing that?" He said, "Well, if I hit a person's rib cage, I want to be able to puncture through to the lungs." And he's never done that to anybody, but the fact that he would train himself to the point where he could, theoretically, I thought was, I thought these are my people.
Yeah, well, there's something, I think, inside of any of us that take this on and stay in it for more than a few years, and especially people that have done it for a lifetime. There's a little bit of that edge in there, whatever you want to call it, I guess. And so yeah, it's interesting that you identified yourself very early on with those being your people. So that's
Yeah.
that's funny. Okay, great. Well, Thank you very much, Sensei Giffen. This has been a pleasure. I've learned a few things here that I didn't know. Chitoryu being my the style that I've been studying for the last almost a decade now, and I'm always interested in learning some new things about the founders and about those that have been fairly senior in it for a number of years, including yourself. So today was on a personal note. Selfishly, I really enjoyed this, and I'm sure that those watching will also get some enjoyment out of it as well. So thank you very much again for joining me today.
Thank you for asking. It was a real pleasure to go through this. So thank you.